Hey Anurag, Praveen, can we start?
Sure, I'm ready.
So we are live. All right. Yep. Thank you so much. Welcome everyone for the leadership series Fireside Chat with Praveen, Executive Director, India IT COO Nomura, moderated by Anurag Gupta. Before we start the session, I would quickly want to brief you about First Meridian. First Meridian is a HR investment platform founded in 2018. Invested by world-renowned investors John Core, Samara, and Goldman Sachs. So in last 2 years, so we have acquired 3 companies, namely now Rpa and Affluent Global. So as on date, we have close to about 90,000 odd associates, who are on our contracted payroll. So here we bring the first leadership series webinar, where Anurag will moderate the session with Praveen. Over to you, Anurag.
Thank you, Raghav. Thank you so much. Praveen, welcome once again. And participants, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, Praveen, and I'm really looking forward to your insights, I think it's very important for me to introduce you. I mean, a lot of people anyway knows you on the call, but let me still put a structure to it. So guys, and it's a pleasure to have Praveen on the call. Praveen, interestingly, he's been a lifelong learner. I mean, he comes with electronic industrial engineering from University of Pune way back in 1992. Then he did his MBA from Newport University back in 1995. AMP graduate from IIM Bangalore 2009. A postgraduate diploma in digital businesses from Columbia Business School and MIT Sloan 2020. He's a certified coach, an ISF certified coach, and yes, he's a certified corporate director. So absolutely, a person who understands, who have gone through the rigor of academy and professional life. On a professional front, close to 3 decades of experience. Initially started with services organization like TCS, Zensar, and then moved on to Accenture. But in the last 10 years, he is with Nomura as executive director. He is the IT COO, fintech division. He comes with a very amazing experience in IT business management, IT finance, financial planning, budgeting, strategy, operational excellence. And yes, I think very importantly, he has served across industries, across domains at very senior levels. And yes, during this webinar discussions, I got to know a little more about Praveen on the personal side of it, the fun side of it. And guess what, guys? I mean, he loves sleeping. And yes, I'm not sure he gets enough time for it, but yes, he loves sleeping. He has a fine taste for whiskeys and he loves tasting them. So Praveen, I would love you to be my host at some point in time post-COVID.
Sure.
And yes, he is into fitness freak. He's into paragliding. He also have a pilot license. He enjoys trekking. And yes, he has a bucket list, interestingly, which he wants to do in his life. So Praveen, that's a little about you, I know. Welcome once again. Little over to you, Praveen.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for taking the time on a Friday evening. I know it is not very easy to take time out, particularly in the environment that we are in and everybody working from home. So really, thank you very much. The thing that I cherish most, apart from, the friendship, with Anurag and of course, Manisha and Sunil, who sort of connected me with Anurag. So apart from that, I'm here for you, and I really value the time that you're sort of putting in here. So I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Praveen. Just before we get started, 3 important things. One, Praveen and I am both right now in Maharashtra. I mean, he's in Mumbai, I'm in Pune. We're in a midst of heavy rains. So there be a possibility that there may be a power disruption and you may see one of us going offline. But bear with us for 30-60 seconds, we'll be back again. Second, all the opinions expressed in this call, all the views expressed especially by Praveen on this call, represent his personal experiences, his own personal views, not necessarily represents anything to the organization he belongs to, which is Nomura in this case. So what he would share his own personal view, his own personal learnings, and what he kind of discussed with his peers and his friends along and colleagues along, right? So that's one thing. And third, if you have any questions for us to address and answer, there's a Q&A section. Please feel free to set up or ask questions from us. I think with this, we get started, Praveen.
Sure.
So Praveen, very interesting, very unique, which I found in your journey of 30 years or 28 plus years. You spent close to 12, 15 years in a services organization, a classical TCS, Zensar, and Accenture. And then you moved to a captive in a BFSI space. And then again, 10 years. I'm sure there would have been some difference of experiences, a very unique way of looking your experience of a services versus working with a client in captive environment. Just want to hear that little bit about you, a little about your experiences on that front.
Sure. And thank you. And this is not the first time I'm being asked this question. Trust me, there's plenty of people that I've had this similar sort of question and sort of, discussion with. So yes, it's been interesting. The way I sort of describe it is, in your head, you sort of, you think about being on the sell side versus being on the buy side. And for me personally, it was, it was just the thrill of having gone through the rounds of interactions and discussions and interviews that I had with Nomura in this case, of course, and then I decided to sort of join Nomura as a firm and join its GIC in Bombay. IT services industry is what it is. I'm sure there's plenty of us around the table here who've been there, done that. We all know how that works. And to be honest, in 2010, I actually had the option of moving away from Accenture. I was moving away for reasons that are best kept for another conversation. But when I was moving away, I had the option of joining another services firm. And if you are amongst the audience, anyone sort of belongs to those two firms that I'm going to name, please don't take it as an offense. I still respect both those firms. So I had the option of joining, either a Capgemini or HP at that point in time. And yes, Anurag, I know you're Capgemini. So no offense meant to those two. The only reason why I joined Nomura was I went through such a grueling process of being selected there, which was 10 rounds of discussions and interviews. So there is a bit of a personal anecdote behind this about the reason for joining Nomura. And honestly, I've not regretted it ever. It's just a fantastic place to be, and the dynamics are kind of different. So coming back to the question, right, on the table, which is how is it different, right? I think living and breathing in a GIC or a global capability center, as they call it now, GCC, and some people call it differently now as it evolves. And we'll hopefully talk about that in the conversation further in the next 60 minutes. But living and breathing in an organization like that is extremely dynamic. You're in the face of the customer. You know who you're serving. The customer is sort of almost breathing down your neck. So the way you react to situations, the way you sort of set yourself up for success, and all the programs and projects that you're doing, the way you set them up for success is very, very different. It's very dynamic. I think the one thing that I would say is, if there ever was an environment, and I've been in the technology division, so I'm talking about technology, but the same holds true for finance and operations and other corporate divisions in a captive. If there ever was an environment which would lend itself beautifully to an agile way of working or a DevOps way of working, I would say it is the captives, right? Because it just comes very, very naturally in that organization, because you're literally sitting, most times you're sitting right next to your stakeholders. So the ability to get something done quickly and in an agile manner is probably the highest there. And that, I think, is something that differentiates, living, surviving, growing in a captive versus working in a service provider environment. I hope that sort of answers the question.
Fantastic. No, Praveen, that answers the question. And just kind of one more point on that, does a captive make you a less hunter than a farmer?
Well, good question. The captive, it depends, right? The captive has its own hunting, and it's really up to the individual. And individuals that you find typically in captives, and I'm not meaning this in any derogatory way to other industries and other people working in other areas. We are all rightfully in the place where we belong to be and we truly deserve. But captive environment, the people have a different kind of hunger. There is always a hunger, and honestly, you'll find hunters and you'll find farmers in any environment. You will find hunters and farmers in the captive too, right? So people like me, for example, we do our own bit of sort of hunting in a captive environment, particularly when you're setting things up and you want some extra dollars to get some project done. I'm sure the delivery guys and I'm sure people in operations and finance sort of do the same thing. So I think I think hunting and farming coexists in every environment. There may be potentially, one could argue the case that there may be less of hunting happening in captives, but there is equally evidence to prove that that is not the case. For example, you will find that banking captives particularly, right, are the ones who adopt new technology the fastest. They are the ones who take a lot of pride in building applications in-house, right? I mean, I would almost argue the case that, financial services captives pride themselves in being better technologists than the service providers and system integrators themselves. Now, that doesn't come without being a very acute, hunter who's hunting for a new business opportunity. And because you want to satisfy that business need, you then go back and build those tools and applications and set up processes to be able to win that new business.
Thanks, Praveen. This was really helpful because that one question keeps coming to mind, right? In-house customers versus an external customer. But
trust me, in-house customers are more difficult to manage because the escalation paths are clearly defined. It just takes a momentary glitch, and before you know it, there's 10 other people involved in the conversation that you didn't want involved.
So. Absolutely, I could resonate some of my experience with GE. Yes. And check is those days, and then Capgemini back to So yes, absolutely with you. So very interesting, when we start talking about captives with 8, 10, 12 years back, right? It was captives, and then the term coined was GICs, global in-house capability. Centers, GIs, right? Then came to GCCs, capability centers, and yesterday I was appraised by you. There's global innovation centers. So, Praveen, just walk us through the journey of this evolution. Because always been a cost arbitrage, right? In the past, where I would send a package of work to India, it's a cost center where so-called decision maker sits on site. So can you just educate us, help us trend to the journey of this captive to innovations? Yeah.
Sure. So interesting question. Again, something that comes up all the time. And I'm not particularly a fan of one phrase or one word versus the other. But I'm sure there is good reason why consulting houses like Everest and Gartner's, they keep coming up with these terms. Surely there is something going on. So here is my interpretation of why the terms have changed, because the meaning of what the captive does has changed over a period of time. What it does for its parent organization has evolved in the true sense. So when you had a captive, you called it a captive 10 years ago. It was a captive because it is like having somebody in captivity and you ask that person to do something and the person did that. You then called it as a global in-house center because yes, it was serving only in-house, but it was now serving you globally, right? So maybe that's the reason why it was called GICs. And then they became capability centers, which is a very natural evolution from being an order taker to now evolving to truly partnering with the business and demonstrating your capability and your ability to do different things, whether it is in the form of technology or in the form of bringing process consistencies. Because remember one thing, here is a term I like to, here's a picture I like to paint with all the GICs or GCCs, right? I call them as a center, which is literally seeing the underbelly of the organization, right? So if you are a global parent organization, let's say a bank or you're an insurance company, when you sit in a captive, you're literally seeing the underbelly. So you're seeing everything that is not so pleasant, right? You're seeing the intestines and you're seeing all the intertwinings of what is going on in that gastronomic system of the organization. And you can find faults and you can find flaws, right? In that, because you get that perspective, because you're sitting in this unique position of being able to see the underbelly of the organization. It positions you very uniquely to then be able to come up with ideas, come up with suggestions, come up with demonstrating your capability and ability to be able to cleanse the organization. And when I say cleanse, make it more efficient cost-wise, make it more efficient in terms of being able to sort of create and come up with new product lines. And that is the reason why today a lot of the GCCs are being termed as innovation centers. Because guess what? It is that view of the underbelly, and it is therefore the ideas of doing new things and doing things differently, which has now earned them that badge of being an innovation center. So you'll find many banks. I mean, I'm more closer to banks than to insurance companies and some of the other captives. But banks certainly. I mean, you'll find there are many public examples. One including ours too. But you can look at Barclays, for example. They have this program called the RISE program. Right now, the RISE program essentially was to a large extent driven out of India. And the intention was to find new ways and find new solutions by partnering with fintechs, right? And so India, the captive of Barclays in India, or the Voyager program that we did, again, this is not a Nomura. I mean, this is my personal view. But I'm quoting, the Nomura thing just as an example. The Voyager program was a partnership that, we tried to sort of make with, fintech firms in pursuit of solutions that were not meant only for the captive, right? It is a pursuit of finding a solution that is eventually going to serve the parent. And hence, I believe that the journey is kind of evolved from being, captives to GICs to today truly being called as innovation centers or COEs.
No, I think Praveen, what you said is correct, and I mean, a lot of these, again, to quote few, right? Amazons and Googles and even Qualcomm, they have now incubation setup, right?
Yes.
Have their startup incubation centers where they are nurturing great startups, which of course related to their domain. For example, in chip design or embedded space, right? Automotive designing, right? But this, yes, you're right. There's a lot of innovation happening in India.
Yes.
Praveen, just a related question and just curiosity I'm asking. Have you seen the number of patents filed from an Indian ownership perspective? Have you seen that increasing over the period of time in the last couple of years?
I haven't personally tracked it, sorry, so I won't be able to sort of rattle off numbers. But I would imagine that is happening. I would certainly imagine that the numbers being filed, patents being filed from India are certainly on the upswing.
Fantastic. Praveen, this is really helpful. Just before we move on to the next section, Praveen, I just again want to remind participants, thank once again, and tell them that you can post your questions in Q&A section. And again, any views expressed by Praveen on this call is his and does not represent the organization he belongs to. So it's personal experiences and views on it, right? So Praveen, moving forward to your domain, which is BFSI domain, right? I think, see, this pandemic stuck, right? I mean, till October, November last year, we were like, "Wo wahan par hai, we don't need to worry about it, right? It's there in China, it's there in Mexico, it's there in Europe, but we don't have to worry." And then gradually things start falling apart. And yes, March 22nd, we had the first lockdown, right? And the instant reaction was a knee jerk from a lot of organizations across globally, where people started to panic and express there's a mayhem going to happen in the economy side, right? But then things start to stabilize. But if I look at now, like April, probably May was the worst in terms of impact and figuring out what's going on, right? But as we move towards June, July, August now, we have seen certain changes, right? In the way offshoring might happen, in the way the work might come in the way the US or Europe looks at some of these GICs or GCCs. So anything which you've seen changing dramatically or something which is kind of speeding up? Or certain projects or certain areas which probably was going slow, suddenly now becomes like the limelight. So I think over to you, Praveen. Very curious to know that part.
Sure. So there are multiple sort of questions that you posed, right? But let's see if we can sort of peel the onion sort of one by one. So let's start with March versus now, right? And what did the industry sort of go through? And this is my perspective from looking at the captive that I work in, or sort of also tracking some of the other captives. Quite frankly, also some of the service providers, because in my role I still tend to interact a lot with the service providers and system integrators. So it's a mix of sort of that perspective. But let's look at March, and let's look at, let's say, banking, right? I think most banks, multinational and global investment banks, having their GCCs or in-house centers in India, I think probably sensed something was happening. So I don't think there was necessarily a panic or necessarily a feeling of unpreparedness, in the month of March. That's my personal belief. That is because of a few things. Being the captive or an in-house center of a global investment bank, you have no choice but to have your business resiliency plans, BRPs and business impact analysis, and therefore BRP plans and BCP plans are ready. In fact, the regulators, as you would be aware, in most cases for banks, I'm sure holds true for insurance companies and others as well, the regulators actually compel you to test those plans, right? So in some sense, those plans were already tested. The other thing is, so the preparedness to sort of, either return back the work to the onshore locations or return back work to home was kind of tested, right? The other thing is as you sort of would imagine, working in a GIC, you are privy to information because the business really is happening in multiple CBDs, as they call it, right? Central business districts. So you have visibility at all points of time about what is happening in which geography, right? So for example, it is not that people in India who have the kind of visibility to this data, it is not that people did not know that in January there was one case that happened in China. It is not that people did not know there was that case that transmitted to somewhere in the middle of January, transmitted to Kerala, right, from Wuhan. So it is not that people did not know. And how people reacted to it was, I guess it was different for different industries. So if you looked at an industry that was really serving the local market, had no global visibility, and therefore had no exposure to that kind of information, probably reacted too slow, and therefore had a panic attack in March and April. I would tend to think that banking captives, or frankly insurance captives and any others, right? I mean, global corporations, I think they knew what was going on. What helped the banks was the extra bit of preparedness, like we talked about, right? The BCP plans and BRP plans are always in place, right? Those are tested, in fact, every quarter, if not every 6 months. And I think that allowed a much better and easier response and adjustment to what was going to hit us and what did actually hit us in terms of lockdown somewhere around the 21st or 22nd of March. So I don't know if that sort of answers the question, but that's really my take on it.
Oh, thanks, Praveen. I think you rightly said. I have spent personally more than a decade in the BFSI industry, and as you rightly said, I think BFSI stands tall when it comes to handling some of these unnatural or pandemic kind of situations. You're absolutely right. I think the expectations and the laws and the regulators are pretty much strict about this. So, Praveen, I think this work from home model, and I'm going to touch upon that topic a little more diligently because of two or three things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I still remember, without getting into specific names, couple of services, large players, CFOs went on air to say that, hey, it's a pandemic and we might cut down salaries, we might let go people, we'll let go bench. So the panic button hit happened, right? But then they realized that work from home is getting stabilized, right? I mean, productivity and the better, if not equal, if not better, right? And 90% plus people are productive. But then, being from a BFSI industry, I think work from home also comes with challenges of working from home with security protocols and access to a very, very what's it, sensitive data and live feeds, right? Production environment, if I use the right word. So, Praveen, how do you think, and not I'm talking specific to Nomura, but from an industry perspective, how did they manage that? And how would they continue to manage as this might become a new norm and at least we don't have an end date to it? So it's a moving goalpost, right?
Right.
Yeah. Back to you.
Sure. So let me sort of try and sort of wrap up one of the aspects of the earlier question first, which was, I maybe gave you a very narrow and very, let's say, selfish view of the captives and how captives geared up between March and now, and how easily, in my view, how easily they seamlessly sort of moved into the work from home model. But if you look at any of the domestic businesses, they had a tough time, right? So if you pick an example, right? I mean, I'm not necessarily suggesting this is a good or a bad bank, but let's say pick a State Bank of India, right? I mean, we all know how much struggle they would have gone through, because if you imagine State Bank of India to be a retail bank, right? So bulk of the banking is done, it's B2C, so it is done in the branches. Their customers never bothered to adapt to the digital way of banking. They did not bother pushing their customers towards digital way of banking. Their markets were all local, so they were all looking inwards. They were not looking outwards, right? So a bank like that would have probably struggled a lot more than somebody, let's say, working for a global investment bank. So that's an example I want to sort of leave, the audience with when they think about how different industries and different organizations have reacted differently. In fact, they continue to react and adapt very differently even today, to the pandemic. But let's come to the other question in terms of work from home. And I would say that the boon and the bane, right? I think most organizations realized that the boon that this brings is it now does a few things and to different stakeholders in the organization. It allows for people to be more productive. It allows for people to be, the work staff to be happier. It allows for people to be, more contributing towards the objectives that they're trying to serve for their employer, right? So that's the good part. Look at it from a middle management point of view, right? What has it done? It has now compelled the middle management, and in fact, frankly, even the senior management, right? I mean, including people like some of us around the table, right? I mean, it has compelled us to really embrace democratization of decision making, right? I think work from home has been a beauty in terms of just dispensing away from hierarchy, if I can call it that. I think decision making and empowerment it is just democratized. At least that's my view of the world, and the people that I connect with and talk to, they all pretty much say the same thing. And that is a good vibe, right? That's a good virtuous cycle within the organization. What else has it done for the organization? I think it has pushed people to open-heartedly embrace ideas, innovative ideas that they would not have otherwise, right? So if you imagine yourself sitting in February, some of those crazy innovative ideas would have been pushed back upon and disdained upon, right? Or rejected clearly. But today, that's not the case, right? Every and any idea is welcome, because anything that you can do differently, or anything that leads to a better outcome than where you are today, I think stakeholders generally around any organization are more appreciative of that, and more open-minded about it. So I think innovation, therefore, has, the way I see it, and depends on how you define innovation. I have my own way of defining innovation, and I can spend a minute on that. But innovation, in my view, has also democratized, right? It has increased. There's an upsurge in people doing things differently than what they were doing earlier. So that is what I think work from home has done. That's all the positive side. Are there risks involved? Of course there are, right? What are the risks? The risks are you're probably burning your people out, which is something that we talked about, because the boundaries have just gone away. And then look, most people who work in the corporate, I tend to believe, are how should I say? They have something to prove to themselves, right? That is the reason why people join a corporate, right? Imagine yourself joining 30 years ago. I mean, at least in my case, right? Joined about 29 years ago, worked with an organization, and then I am here today, and I'm still in what I call as the corporate rat race. That's not a nice way of saying it, but I'm still in the corporate journey, right? And we are all here because we want to prove something to ourselves, right? That's our visualization of self-realization, right? Now imagine all of these people with the same emotive state of mind, which is they want to prove themselves, blah, blah, blah. They are now finding themselves working harder when they're working from home, right? Because that's just their natural desire. They want to do more for the organization, and they want to sort of move ahead in their careers. So I think that is the not so nice side of working from home. I think it has stretched boundaries of people, and it's not, perhaps not the nice thing to do. And my own personal view is it might probably backfire. When it'll backfire, I don't know, but I'm sure it is going to backfire. And what are the other so nice things, right? So particularly from the banking point of view, the one thing that has changed is in our minds as managers, middle managers, senior managers, whichever way you look at it, right? I mean, no hierarchy, right? Whichever level you look at it. I think what is newfound is trust. I think people have realized that you have to trust your staff to do the right thing. And I think that has been magical, if I can use that term, about working from home and about this whole pandemic. You find managers trusting their employees more. Sure, is there a security risk? Data theft, data security risk? Of course there is, right? Because no matter what you did, you can't stop somebody, logging into a virtual environment and accessing an application or a trading application of a bank. Of course, the network is secure, the access to it is secure, but nobody is watching the staff now standing behind their shoulder, right? So they could take a picture of it, they could sort of take away the data and do what they want to do with it, right? But I think what has happened, and at least my experience has been, that I think, when you endow somebody with trust, they usually don't break it, right? And that's just human nature. No matter which caste, creed, religion, race you belong to, right? So I think people have found themselves being endowed by their line managers and supervisors with that trust, and I think it's a nice place to be. Is it a risk for the organization? Sure, it is. But then look, even the regulators took that risk. I mean, in the peak months of, let's say, April, May, June, I think there's a little bit of retracting back and going back to the offices. But if you look at investment banks, right? I mean, even the regulators like SEC or GFSA or PRA and FCA, they actually allow traders to work from home. I mean, who would have thought in our lifetimes that you're going to have, a trader working from home, right? It was unheard of, correct? So I think, trust begets trust. I guess that's how I would put it.
Thank you, Praveen. No, I think very important aspect of trust. I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, didn't think that way, but yes, for me, that's the binding force. So that's a thread which runs through these organizations today. Absolutely. So, Praveen, before we jump to the next section, I was just having a glance to the questions, right?
Sure.
And a very interesting question came up, which says anonymous attendee. Interesting, even then. I'm going to read for you. Do you
Sure.
see a difference between emerging banking technology and fintech? And do you see them converging at some point in time? So over to you, Praveen.
It's a good question, and it sort of goes back to define, how do you define fintech? And frankly, what is banking technology? Now, if one were to call the legacy systems, no matter how superbly developed they were, and no matter how fast the response time was, of high frequency connectivity to the exchanges and so on. If you were comparing banking technology in that sense, saying this is what the bank already had versus a newbie, a fintech, then my view is that they both are overlapping actually today, right? There's like it's like a confluence of the two happening. I don't know how many of you will associate with this, but I've been to places in Uttarakhand. Most of my treks have been in Uttarakhand, and there are these places called Devaprayag, Rudraprayag. I don't know if anyone of you associate with it, but I'll go ahead with the example anyway. So it's almost like standing at one of those prayags, right, which is a confluence of two rivers, and what comes out of it is completely different, right? But it is still water at the end of the day. It's waters from two rivers that meet. So I think fintech and banking technology is at that stage of confluence, and they will both sort of intertwine, and they will both leverage each other. That's the way sort of I see it. It's a synergistic existence between the two.
Fantastic. Thanks, Praveen. Praveen, very interesting question. Thanks, Madhu, for putting this up. And it ties back to the work from home thing we were discussing, right? He's talking about C19, of course, has instantly transformed cybersecurity, agility, and resiliency, right? From being nice to be a mandatory or must have. Do you think there's going to be a dramatic shift in terms of hiring, or I would rather not say hiring, that's still micro move, but more of an investment perspective, both from, in the people who want to develop or buy, buy and sell side.
Yeah.
But do you see there's going to be an investment coming up big time on the cyber side? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, if there's any, you pick any, not just banking captives, but pick any client, right? Any client who has their business, let's say mostly online or digital, if I can call that term, so let me try and sort of exemplify it, right? Will Tata Motors view cybersecurity and info security the same way post-pandemic as a bank would? Probably not, right? So let's look at the sectors, let's say BFSI sectors, right, which are more digital in nature anyway, right? Those kind of industries and those sectors, the answer is absolutely yes, right? Without any doubt. I think these industries have found themselves pouring in more and more money in not just buying, better and newer third-party technology tools, but also strengthening their teams internally, where need be replenishing those teams with external partners. I see that happening, for the last few weeks, few months now. In fact, I think ever since the pandemic happened, I think it has just accelerated that journey. And what is interesting is, if I can make that point, right? While of course your applications, etc., have to be secure, what you have to now worry about and increasingly worry about is edge security, right? So that is really where a lot of the money is going in. You want to now ensure that the perimeters are secure, so your edges are secured.
No, I think, Praveen, we have been also observing a very similar trends. And being from a talent space, right? I think we are seeing these trends as well. There is increasing demand on the digital as well as the security aspect. So absolutely, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, yes, there's a difference between the segments you belong to, but overall, yes, there's a spike on that front. Absolutely.
Yes.
So, Praveen, being a business guy, I'll just probably dwell into our space now, right?
Sure.
Praveen, we represent, I mean, as an organization, and a lot of people on this call represents what we call as a talent market, or a contingent workforce, or finding talent for organizations like yours, right? So with this pandemic, right? I mean, the office is being closed. The people not in the office, or if they are off in office, very few in numbers. How have you seen the whole talent supply chain has been evolved, right? In terms of, I mean, I'm not talking about from partners, but from your in-house perspective, what are you observing? The way would you, look at a skill, you evaluate a skill, and experience levels have changed, or you are, how you're kind of conducting the interviews, or how you're going to onboard people. What is that significant changes you have observed so far, or you would like to see that continue beyond pandemic as well? So over to you again.
Sure. I'll answer that, but I just got reminded of a data point, and I don't recall the name of the gentleman. Was it Madhav who asked the earlier question?
Yes, Madhav.
I would suggest you look up this study. I actually bumped into it, a few weeks ago. So there's this organization called Sophos, which does a lot of these information security surveys. And this time they did a survey with about 3,500 odd IT/info security managers spread across continents. Okay. But the survey, basically it was a well run and a good sample size and a wide survey. But what they came to find out about India was interesting. Of all the India respondents who responded, 93% of them said that their organization has been cyber attacked. 93%. Okay.
Wow.
Now that does not mean that there was ransomware, or there was money paid out, or there was systems going down, etc. What it means is, they may have very well countered those cyber attacks, right? If the organizations are equipped, they usually tend to counter it. In fact, they proactively know somebody's trying to attack us. But the data point is very telling, right? 93% of Indian organizations in that survey that was responded were cyber attacked post the pandemic hit us in the last few months. So I'll sort of leave that question there, and let's come to this one. So from a talent perspective, there are a few things that have happened, and my observation is that, if I were to address, let's say, the fraternity that you talked about, which is people who are in the hiring business or staffing business, etc. Right? If I were you, and frankly, some of the recruitment teams within organizations also who do a similar job for the businesses, right, for their respective businesses, I think it is time to adopt to and embrace new tools, new ways of doing what you were doing. Right? Mm-hmm. So let's say I was staffing or hiring, I was doing it in a XYZ way. Now I need to do it smarter. Now I need to get to the talent in a different way, right? Evaluate the people differently. Use technologies that are available to me that can help me, shortlist a candidate, right? There are AI engines, and there are AI platforms available where I could be posting a 3-minute video of mine, and somebody could give you a report at the other end saying, this guy is no good, don't hire him. He 90% of his time he spends in arguments, right? For argument's sake, right? So you might get that kind of a psychometric analysis of mine. So use those tools is what I would say. And be more, enable yourself to be able to serve the needs faster, quicker, better. The challenge that I see for fraternity of sort of staffing and recruitment firms, the challenge would be, how do you spread your net wider? Because now your customers are not going to look at they're not going to look at a narrow marketplace. Right? For example, in the work from home environment today, if somebody said, hey, here is a great talented guy, he's in Delhi, would it work? I would say yes. 3 months ago, I would not have said yes in the pre-pandemic time, right? So what does that mean for the hiring and the staffing and the recruitment firms? It means you now have to equally keep pace and widen the net and figure out how to still be able to shortlist people, the usual funnel, shortlist, interview, whatever, right? And then get to the right set of candidates. So that is what I think is changing. I don't know if that answered the question, Anurag, but I'm happy to, if there's anything left unanswered, I'm happy to take a stab at it.
I think you picked up the next question, which I would have asked to ask you, that would a GICs or the organization be open to hire people from across locations, tier 2, tier 3 towns? I think you pretty much answered that, that.
I think that is happening. I think that's happening already, yeah.
This would really happen. So again, going back to a little more deeper into it, right? and again, something which is very, very close to this fraternity. I mean, do you think, and again, it's your broad brush experience of services and captives, your colleagues, your friends in the industry, do you see more contracting happening or more permanent hiring happening over the next, at least for this financial year? And I say financial, at least for next 6 to 9 months. What's your take on that?
Very good question. The short answer is I would see more non-perm. I would see more fungible growth in headcount happening for firms in general, whether it is BFSI or any other firm. People want that flexibility to be able to onboard and offboard as needed, not particularly from the point of view of costs and so on. Costs, of course, is one thing, but also in terms of people, I think have now come to realize that you need different skills at different points in time. And if you can get that flexibility of getting the right skill at the right time with the right person, and you have the flexibility of letting that person go and replacing with somebody else, I think people are kind of more open-minded about it now than they ever were.
That sounds like a good news, Praveen.
Yeah, it is. See, I'll sort of corroborate 2 or 3 other data points, and I'm sort of let me know if I'm sort of rattling away and I can shut up. I do have a tendency to sort of go with the flow. So I'll give you a couple of other corroborative data points. Okay, if you look at the service providers, system integrators and service providers, you'll find interestingly that in April, May, June, guess what? Revenues may not have grown, but their operating margins grew. Right? So how did the operating margins grow? The operating margins grew not because you suddenly went away and vacated a building. Absolutely not, right? You started doing things differently. In fact, the operating margins, in my view, will increase further because as people now realize that they don't have that kind of real estate dependency, the kind of rigidity in terms of everybody has to come to the office, so I have to spend money on ground transportation and taxis and ferrying employees and giving them flight tickets every quarter to go and do reviews with somebody, right? I mean, all of that is just gone out of the window. So operating margins have increased. What does that mean, right? When operating margins increase, no matter how capitalist you are in your head, right? No matter how capitalist you are, when operating margins and there's more money in your hand, you would tend to invest a little bit more of that back in your employees, because end of the day, they are the ones who make you thrive and they are the ones who make you grow. And with that, what will happen is you'll have more talented people available. As I see sort of things going in the future, you'll have more talented, more capable people available and who are willing to work at a lesser salary, at a lesser cost point, because now they're comfortable sitting in their hometowns, right? They are not paying rents through their nose sitting in Chennai and Bombay and Bangalore. So that's the way I sort of see the whole sort of talent market evolving.
Yeah. Very interesting, Praveen, you just said, and reminds me of an article I read yesterday. In New York, Manhattan, a lot of people have actually vacated their, what I call box-room apartments.
Yeah. That's right. I mean,
those
a lot of yes, it's happened in
rentals were like close to like $100,000, $200,000 dollars a year. They have kind of moved out of those and moved back to their farmhouses and their, the what I call countryside. Because work from home has given that flexibility. You rightly said, I think.
Yes.
But that kind of puts me to a question, and probably that's a more larger or a longer discussion. And probably I'll have to invite you again with maybe a larger set of panelists.
Sure.
See, a lot of us are a part of a organization which is people-oriented, right? We work through people, we service people, by people, right? I mean, like the preamble of it, like Constitution of India, right? Of people, for people, by people. This culture thing, which is very important for us, right? How do we instill values, culture, and that collaboration, connectivity? I think that somewhere becomes a big question mark, the work from home environment.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful question.
I'm not looking for a straight answers right now, Praveen, because this is a very gray subject. Probably needs a lot more debate, but anything you can just share something which would help us, or any best practice you have read or you've heard of it. I think that would be very, very encouraging for all of us.
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to do that. And frankly, these are not my thoughts and my ideas. So I'll put that disclaimer up front. These are actually stolen from a couple of advisors working with Gartner, and I ended up watching their webinar. I'm happy to share it with yourself, Anurag, and with Raghav and team, and then you guys can maybe share it wider. But I found that 1 hour webinar really very, very insightful, and it was all about what does the pandemic really mean from a people perspective, and a few things really stuck in my head. As an organization, pre-pandemic, right? We all go to the office and we are all sort of doing this softer thing about the organization, about hamara values ye hain. Sorry, I'm speaking in Hindi. Maybe I should switch back in case there is an international audience here. My apologies for that. But we are all kind of always concerned about how am I exhibiting myself? What are the values that I'm instilling in my staff? What is the culture of the organization, right? And that was all great. When you were within four walls, you could do meetings in conference rooms and meet people face to face, and they could see how you were behaving. In fact, a new person joined in, you would put that person through an induction program, saying, here is what the firm believes in, these are our core values, yada yada yada. Right? Today, you can't do that. So there is this concept that got introduced to me. I mean, in that webinar, the Gartner webinar, and this gentleman, I forget his name, he made this point. He said, as line managers, right, and middle, senior, whatever, right, as line managers, we need to find ways to create those water cooler moments, right? Because when you're working physically in a space, you have a chance to interact with somebody informally, right? So to get to know somebody better. And they in American terminology, it's called having a chat over a water cooler, and just getting to know people better, right? Because end of the day, values and culture gets instilled by looking at how somebody else is behaving or how somebody else is talking, what somebody else is saying to me, how is somebody else in my organization addressing the problem that I'm trying to address, right, etc., etc. So they said, look for opportunities. What is the biggest challenge in working from home and remote work today is encourage your staff to look for opportunities to have non-work related conversations, which is becoming increasingly difficult because on the one hand, our work and personal life boundaries are blurring. We are just getting burnt out, working 14 hours a day, 12 hours a day. But we need to find time, right? As managers, we need to encourage that, and we need to maybe even sort of put a structure around it, right? Find moments of what is called as water cooler moments, right? Just engage with people. So that's one. But that's more the how of it. Here is the input I got on the values, and it was a very interesting take that one of the panelists in that, I mean, they were all Gartner folks. One of the Gartner sort of, researchers or advisors said that, why do we want to be associated with and stuck with in a very dogmatic way with what the values were, right? This is an opportunity for us to go back and reach out to our employees and find what are the new set of values that the organization stands for, right? So it's almost like doing a bottoms up, if you will, of finding what the new values are. What are my values? What do I really stand for as an organization? So he said, maybe this is time to, typically values and core values are sort of top down, right? And the take that this Gartner person took on the whole subject was, this is a time to reach out to your staff, maybe through focus group discussions in small bits and pieces, 15, 20 people, or maybe just do an online survey, just invite people's thoughts. So his take on the subject was, this is an opportunity to redefine your values and involve your employees, involve the staff in redefining what those values are. What do you really stand for? So hopefully that answers the question.
I think you said it beautifully. And I think I just probably quote a little bit about ourselves. I mean, back when we started this company in July 2018, I think we are a combination of three companies, right? As Raghav said, we acquired. I still remember our group CEO, Mr. Sudhakar, took 55 of us to Kochi for 4 days, 5 days, to actually define a common set of values, co-author the common set of values, vision and mission of the organization. So I think what you said we did, but I think its need is more and more often now and across the board. So I think that was an experience of mine, which is very unique in my life, co-authoring with a set of 55 leaders across organizations, different organizations, a common set of values, a common set of vision and mission of an organization. So you're right, absolutely. I like the water cooler moments, right?
Yeah.
So Praveen, I'm again back to a very interesting question. We're talking a lot about a gig economy, right? Where you have those independent contractors, right? Who kind of there'll be a lot of platforms in the past where you would put a piece of work, there'll be a rate card, and you'll just give it to, and you'll have somebody in Ukraine, somebody sitting in Russia, somebody sitting in Uzbekistan doing this piece of work. Do you think that's going to be more and more from Indian context, or that's still a little far-fetched idea right now?
I think it is already happening.
Yeah.
I think it is already happening. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. I think it's already happening. And I mean, I'm struggling to think of any interactions that I've had or any observations I've had about GICs or GCCs doing that? Probably not. But are some of the larger system integrators and IT service providers in India doing it? Of course they are, right? They're already doing it. I mean, I know of some examples, and I'm happy to quote and pick names here. If anyone of the attendees is from that organization, give yourselves a pat on the back. I know of Wipro who does it. I know of Infosys who does it. They just put a problem statement out there on what they call as it's like the open cloud, right? And they just allow anyone who wants to solve it, including their own employees who may want to solve that problem and develop that code on a weekend, for example, or on a day off, versus somebody sitting in Ukraine and Uzbekistan, like you said, who might want to do it. So I think it's already happening. Developers and developing developers bandwidth being available on a cloud, and you don't know who the developer is. I think that's already happening.
I remember Wipro actually making some kind of investment, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
in one of these platforms a couple of years back. I'm not sure where they are in the journey, but they were trying to do something on their own as well.
Yeah.
Just one more question before I switch on to something very different and very unique to you, actually, Praveen. It's more about you then. But before that, see, RPA, I mean, especially been observing a lot of RPAs getting deployed, and there's been a lot of articles and a lot of news and a lot of broadcast on the social media from some of the companies like Blue Prisms and Automation Anywhere during the COVID times, where the adoption is very high, especially in shared services kind of environment, which is data entry, repetitive jobs. Do you think that's going to be the increasing trend in the GICs or even service and system integrators, the RPA adoption and usage?
I think, I'll give you my view on it based on my observations of the last 3 or 4 years. I think RPA adoption is done. I think people are looking at how to make that as IPA, how to make that as intelligent process automation, right? So the challenge really didn't end, and I think this is a general realization in the industry. RPA was to look at processes that are repetitive, or to a large extent repetitive, processes that were difficult to do and that were prone to manual errors, right? So repetitive, difficult, and prone to manual errors. So you develop Blue Prism any, right? You developed a bot. The bot now does what the human was supposed to do.
Correct.
I think there were a couple of misconceptions as well. So I'll try and address those as well. Does that mean that the individual who was doing that task has now become redundant? The answer is no. The individual now is enriching the organization by looking at the business process, by thinking about how this process can become more efficient. How can I make my bank or my organization more successful? And not worrying about, I'm running these 10 macros in these spreadsheets. Will I make a mistake? And then I'm doing a copy paste and oops, I did actually make a mistake. Oh gosh, right? So the human bandwidth of error proneness, doing a difficult job, that has now been replaced by a bot. And that human bandwidth is now freed up to do more intelligent things. Okay.
Yes.
And while that is happening, just imagine the tools are also being taught. So today you have RPI tools that have an AI layer over it, right? So you teach that AI engine how to behave differently, how the bot software will behave differently if the external trigger on the business process changed. Okay, so I have a business process which is running absolutely fine, but if that process undergoes a change, and if I have an IPA rather than an RPA, then hopefully the IPA already knows how to behave differently to this different circumstance. And therefore the RPA, in my view, is done. At least in most organizations that are worth their salt, as they call it. I think RPA was adopted 2.5, 3 years ago. I think people are starting to look at how to make that IPA.
Oh, that's amazing. Praveen, that's a nice way of looking at IPA. Yeah. Thanks again. So I learned two things very new in the last 24 hours from you. One is the innovation centers, two is the IPA. I think it's very interesting. Thanks, Praveen. Really, really appreciate that. Praveen, one more question, last question. I think there are a few more questions from the participants, but one more question which I saw on live streaming. See, the pandemic happened, and there is a sense, there is a feel of protectionism, right? Across European and American geographies, right? Which says, hey, hold the work to your chest, right? Don't let it go off. There's been a lot of hoo-ha around this, right? On the media, and a lot of policies have been made in different countries. And pandemic has kind of deepened that or speeded up that whole process. Do you think a substantial impact of growth of IT outsourcing in India because of that? I mean, very short and sweet, not getting into specific of companies and all. I mean, I know it's a very sensitive topic, but just kind of get a view for sense from you.
Look, it's difficult to say. It's difficult to say if protectionism will lead to more outsourcing, offshoring, or not. Right? I think fundamentally what is happening is work being executed away from the office premises is already happening.
Yes.
Right? Now it's a question of what is that away? How do I define that away? Is that away a guy 3 streets away from me, right? I'm in Atlanta. There's somebody else who's now in, let's say, Atlanta, but in a different suburb who is doing the job, or whether it is somebody sitting in India doing the job, right? So that away definition is what will change and it'll evolve. But I would like the audience, and this is how I have been sort of viewing numbers and sort of looking at the big picture of the world, if you will, right? Rather than being worried about this protectionism. My big picture interpretation of the world is, look at all of us. I mean, I feel sorry for, and I definitely feel sad for people who lost jobs, who are in manufacturing, and there's been a slowdown. But if you look at all of us, right, in the quote unquote the services industry, I would like to believe that our contribution and in output terms, I think has been supremely high in the last 3 or 4 months. So our contribution to the GDP has been more than it ever was pre-COVID time, right? And therefore, more is getting done, right? So now, when more is getting done, there is more opportunity for everybody. Today, we don't see that opportunity, but that opportunity will come. Today, we don't see it for various reasons. We don't see it because we are all stretching 14 hours, 12 hours a day. Well, if I don't stretch 12 hours a day, and if I can limit myself to 8 hours a day, strictly speaking, then somebody else could be doing that job. So I think employment in general, my personal view, okay, and you know, time will tell, of course. In the services sector, employment in general will increase, work output will increase. You know, manufacturing is suffering today, but you know, hopefully with the vaccine, etc., in place, you know, let's say by Q1, I mean, realistically speaking, you know, I doubt if we'll have anything by December that is well tried and tested. So let's say if it comes out by March 2021, I think once that is behind us, once the vaccine is in, then you know, manufacturing economy will boom back again. But I don't see any dearth of work being done, because what the organizations have now tasted, think about it as a corporate, right? If you were a business owner, what you have now tasted is, wow, I could do so much which I never did before, and I could do it so differently than I never did before, right? Now this applies to the services industry. I mean, I'm like I caveated earlier, this is services industry, and I think services will evolve much faster, more employment, and I think more opportunities to do newer things and new products.
Oh, thanks. That's pretty great, you know, because that's true actually. You know, I mean, services from a perspective has done well and doing well. So I think we're keeping our fingers crossed that the trend continues and manufacturing should reverse the trend post the COVID, barring Russia, unless until we decide to travel to Russia to get a shot from Putin's family. All right. Praveen, just kind of, you know, something very, very personal to you, you know, and something which I'm quite amazed your learning journey, right? You've been a learner for like long, you know, engineering, MBA, AMP, corporate director, digital course, ICF, I think. And I mean, last we were talking about a public policy course from ISB, which you prompted me to have a good deco on the website, where I personally went spent a lot of time reading about that course. Quite amazed. So Praveen, you have gone through the journey and you continue to strive, and your passion is to learn even today. I mean, I remember the discussion between you and me that every year you want to do something and learn something new, right? So one, if you could share what has really changed in you, and what's your pearls of wisdom? I would say pearls of wisdom for the mid managers, where you would like to instill that thought that learning never stops, and there has to be not just learning on the ground, but there has to be some classroom learnings as well in a very structured format. So over to you, Praveen. I mean, very curious to know that.
I don't know. Firstly, I don't know if I would call it as pearls of wisdom. Okay, there's no pearls of wisdom.
Okay, silence to wisdom.
So my family tells me you're crazy. You don't know what to do. Therefore, you just pick random things and you're just learning different things. So you know, I tend to agree with them sometimes. You know, I just pick new things to learn. So look, I mean the honest answer is, you know, one has a curiosity, right, to know so many things about the world. Now, I don't know whether that comes, with age, or whether it comes with, just simply being studious. In my case, I'm not studious. In fact, even the engineering thing was just an accident. I call it an accident, but I was good at math and reasonably good at physics, but very bad at chemistry. So I figured that okay, the best thing I would do is do engineering, and and I sort of packed my bags and went away. Part of the reason I went away was to just live independently and live in a hostel and sort of have an independent life. So that was my youth. So engineering just happened as an accident. And then if you notice, I've done different things in life. And I truly believe that by doing different things in life, interacting with different people, you learn new things. And I guess the quest in me of the inquiry in my mind has stayed alive. I don't know why. In fact, even just prior to starting, the official kickoff of this webinar, Raghav and I and you were discussing about the R naught of this virus, right? And how the R naught will get impacted once this virus, the coronavirus, mutates over a period of time. Now,
Correct.
One would be thinking, what a foolish thing to sort of read about, right? But I've read about it. So it's just inquiry and an inquiring mind. What I would say for the mid managers is, don't sort of put a burden on yourself. One has to study something every year. It's not like that. We all learn every day, right? The way I sort of measure myself, sometimes micro and sometimes macro measures, but the questions are the same. And the question that I ask myself is, when I look back, let's say if I look back today, did I learn at least one thing new? Similarly, I ask myself, let's say once in a quarter or once in 6 months, have I acquired a new skill? Do I know something today that I did not know before? And it could be anything, right? So there is no pressure, which is why you'll find me doing these bizarre things. So I did an MBA, and then I did an AMP from IIM Bangalore, and then suddenly I picked a digital transformation course. Frankly, the digital transformation course was primarily because I loved David Rogers' teaching. I had interacted with him before, so I just followed him. I said, okay, whatever he teaches, I want to learn. So I just learned. Okay, sometimes there's no reason. This year, I'm going to learn cyber forensics and cyber law. I mean, I have nothing to do with law, but I'm going to learn it anyway, right? So I guess if one kept the curiosity and the inquiring mind stimulated, you just learn. I mean, there's so much in the world to learn. I don't know if that answered the question. I probably spoke more about myself than addressing the.
See, there's never a right and wrong answer when it comes to personal, right, Praveen? And I myself been a very strong person who advocates learning and more structured learning as well, along with on the ground kind of, on the job learning. So absolutely, Praveen, I think it's very important to stay connected, and things are evolving like a next big speed. I mean, you really not know what's happening yesterday will happen tomorrow. So
Yes.
I think the appetite to learn and appetite to learn from the best of minds and best of brains, I think is the most important thing, right? And that probably the structure, whether digital from Columbia or MIT or ICA, or mentoring folks, or whether it is corporate directorship, I think it's kind of amazing, I mean, I mean, really,
you're right. I guess the one bit that I missed, and you kind of said it, but I probably got the cost of repeating. Structured learning when you're in a classroom, whether it's a virtual classroom or a physical classroom, what I find most enriching, for example, the certification that I did of being an independent director. So I'm certified to be an independent director on the boards of companies. But when I sat through those lectures, right, it wasn't as much what the teacher was teaching. It was more from the classroom that I sat with. I mean, these guys were, really senior folks in their respective, in their own right, in their respective companies, organizations. Some of them are entrepreneurs. And I really loved that interaction. So I drew a lot of learning from them as opposed to learning from the professor.
I guess this was IOD masterclass, right?
Yes.
I did it myself in 16 in Bangalore. And you're right, peer learning was amazing.
Yes, it's just amazing.
So Praveen, I think that's pretty much sums up the set of questions I have. I would quickly come to a very favorite section of mine, which is, a fireside, like a literally quick turnaround questions, right? I call them, right?
Sure.
So Work from home, Praveen, you think 50% or less than 50%? I mean, 50, less 50 or more than 50%?
For me or for organizations?
For say BFSI captives or captives at large.
I would say at a minimum 50%, if not more.
Brilliant. That's going to be a new norm, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Praveen, what do you think? I mean, the recovery of economy, right? If I have to put it, North America, Europe, now UK separate because Brexit, right, and APAC. Which one you put first, which will recover faster, and which I mean, again, purely your view.
I think the US will recover faster.
Okay.
I mean, I could give you reasons if you wanted, but
yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
Did you? Oh, do you wanted 1, 2, 3, 4, all of them? Okay, so I would say US right at the top. I would say Asia and then Europe.
And then
I kind of clubbed UK with it, but yeah, maybe UK first and then Europe, because Europe you're looking at a conglomerate of countries. So I would say America and then Asia and then UK and Europe.
I think that probably reminds me of 2008 subprime also. A very similar trajectory, no?
Yeah.
Kind of.
The reasons are very simple, right? US, and I love reading a little bit about macroeconomics, so I apply very basic principles to life, and they're not very difficult for anyone to learn. US pours money. Right? US just doles out money, right? So you have the Fed doling out money. I don't recall, more than one, maybe two occasions where the Fed did not sort of dole out money. So they have money available at their disposal. They just literally print it. And secondly, they're a consuming economy, right? So, there's nothing that can go wrong with that economy. They have to bounce back eventually.
I love the word they use, quantitative easing, right?
Yes.
They print money.
Yeah.
Dollar being dollar. Yes.
Correct.
I think that's probably answered the question why US first.
Yes, absolutely.
Indian economy to bounce back. How many quarters? 1, 2, 3, 4 from now?
From now, I mean, if I count this,
let me qualify the question.
Sorry.
To come to pre-COVID days.
Oh, to come to pre-COVID days. Oh, well, pre-COVID days were not that exciting anyway, right? I mean, the economy has been slipping since 2017. So pre-COVID days, I think, another 3 quarters, I would think.
3 quarters. So pretty much you're talking about June, the first quarter of the next
fiscal year. The Q1 of next fiscal year, yes.
Yeah, got it. No, Praveen, I think that pretty much kind of captures some of the thoughts or some things we wanted to ask you, or more than ask you, I think hear your views and your thoughts around it. I think that's pretty much from my side. I'll quickly go and see the set of questions we have.
I have just one parting gift, if I can call it that, for the audience. But you can skim through the questions.
I think most of it's been covered, Praveen. It's more about plug and play contractors. It's about technologies we're going to be hiring. India gaining from pandemic. Yes, so we have discussed and touched upon most of these topics in some form or the other. So over to you, Praveen. The last parting words that you said.
Equally, I'm happy to spend time. If there are other questions, I love chatting, so I don't have a problem with that. But I call this as a gift. But please, it's not really any pearls of wisdom gift, whatever. This is something that I just scribbled. I like to think about what should I leave my audience with, right? At the end of everything, right? Everything else you discuss is just corporate jargon and nonsense at some level, right? But what do you leave yourself? What do you want to take away? So, and I coined something around PPE. PPE kits have become so sort of, frequently talked about things. I thought, let me just pick PPE. So here is my hard skills or corporate version of PPE, and here is my personal version of soft skills and as human beings version of PPE. Okay. So if the audience is ready, I can probably narrate it. So the corporate version of PPE, as I think about it, right, is how do I behave in a corporate, right? It is the first P stands for what is the purpose? What's the objective that I'm trying to drive, right? The second B is the second P is persuasion or being perseverant, right? Because these are difficult times. So, one has to exhibit more of those qualities. And the third E is engage. Remember the water cooler moments I talked about? So engage with your peers, engage with your manager, engage with your subordinates, right? So that's the corporate version of PPE. The personal version of PPE as individual, so internal looking, the soft skills PPE is patience, P for patience, both for yourself as in be patient to yourself if you're not able to achieve something. The second P is also patience. So exhibit patience with people around you who have not been able to complete a task, for example. And the third, the third one, so PPE, the third sort of acronym there, E, is empathy.
Yes.
Right. So I would like to leave you with those two PPEs. You can pick the corporate version, the hard skills, or you can pick the soft skills. Just
a combination of both.
Both is
beautiful.
Yeah.
Praveen, again, thank you so much. I mean, this is a pleasure talking to you, and I think got a lot more insights today in certain topics where we keep reading about it, but hearing from you has been really helpful.
Thank you.
And it's a collective wisdom you kind of shared with us. So thank you so much sharing your insights, being a guest on a Friday evening. I wish you a very stay safe to you and your family and your colleagues. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay connected, Praveen. It's such a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
At the same time, want to thank all the participants to come over and be with us to this journey of these discussions. And yes, Raghav and the entire team to kind of setting it up. So, Praveen, thank you so much. I really,
Not at all. Not at all. Thank you very much. It was an honor and a privilege to have this conversation, and it's great to sort of let your views be known. And thank you very much to the audience who participated. We went longer than an hour, so thank you for your patience and your time on a Friday evening.
Yeah, thanks, and I look forward to your hosting the wine and whiskey tasting sessions.
Oh yes, I'll do one of those today evening. Yes.
You take care. Thanks,
everyone. Thank you so much, Anurag, Praveen. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.